Hey, everybody, this is Mike Feldbauer from the Flagler County Drug Court Foundation, coming to you from the Flagler Voice podcast studios here in Palm Coast. And we have, once again, Robert in the studio. This is Robert number 5 today. And we're going to have some great conversation. You know, those of you who have listened to Robert in the last 4 broadcasts that we've had with him, you know a lot about him already. But in his 39 years in recovery, I think it's going to take us a long time to hear all the stories. So once again, Robert, welcome.
Hey, it's always a pleasure. I appreciate you making the accommodation in your schedule to move our recording date a couple days sooner, and I appreciate that very, very much. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, as we have talked off air, because of your experience and our dedication on the road to recovery from the Flagler County Drug Court Foundation, is we want to get more information out to our community about recovery, okay? Not just about addiction, but about the recovery portion of it. Because as we've said every time, and will continue every time, neither of us have ever met somebody that's been involved in addiction that wanted to be there.
Yeah,
that
right.
wasn't the goal.
Yeah.
Many other things that take place to get people involved in it, but it's not because it's not a choice, everybody. You might think it is, but it's not a choice. So today we've got some information that Robert wants to talk about, and some of it we've talked a little bit about in the past, but we're going to talk some more about it. And one of the topics he wanted to talk about today is, why is it so imperative that the addict and the codependent, because we've talked about that in the past, get well? So, Robert, your comments.
Thank you. You know, I have entertained that question throughout my recovery journey, and the reason that both parties need to get well is that if both parties don't get well, if they don't go in the same direction at the same time, it's been my experience that, as crazy as it may sound, the one person will try to sabotage the other person, because at any given point, the codependent or the addict needs that person to not be well in order to get away with what they've been getting away from.
So before we get further into it, okay, for some of the people that might be listening that don't understand what a codependent is versus the person that's in addiction, can you spend a little time talking about that?
Yeah. Well, the person who's addicted, obviously, either to a substance or to behavior, either gambling or sex or compulsive overeating, alcohol, drugs, anything that falls under where they're doing things that they wouldn't normally do if they were acting in a sane manner, and they become addicted to that substance, either physiologically or mentally, or even socially. The codependent is a person who almost by radar, they attract these people in their life because they constantly need someone to fix. Their whole agenda in life is to fix that person, and they need that person to be sick in order to substantiate who they are. So the codependent is usually the significant other, the loved one, the family member, the mom, the dad, the sister, the brother, the significant other, and the addict is the addict.
Yeah, I know there was a name for it, named after somebody who was the number one codependent talked about in the world at one point, where he'd actually participate in getting you sick, unhealthy, whatever it was, and then make a big deal about bringing you back through it, making you healthy, and we'll go back and forth. And I forget that name, but it's out there. Someone will remember it.
You know, I don't know who that person is, although I would think that once I realized I was becoming well as terms of an alcoholic or drug addict, there was no turning back for me. You couldn't convince me. To this day, you can't convince me to drink or to use, because I know what's going to happen as a direct result of that. Now, it gets trickier and more subtle, I think, from a codependent standpoint. Because what's wrong with wanting another person to get well? What's wrong with meeting their needs? We seem to paint that with a different brush. Codependents don't appear to be as destructive externally as an alcoholic or drug addict might, but yet they're not fulfilling who they were. They would give anything not to have to babysit that person. And they become as addicted to a person, place, or a thing as the addict becomes addicted to alcohol or drugs or what have you.
I can hear you. Does the codependent have very similar triggers to trigger them into what they're doing as the addict?
You know, triggers are different for different people. A trigger might be a song. A trigger might be a relationship. A trigger might be where they go, what they do, who they do it with, that sort of thing. That's why in AA, one of the things that in Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step programs, they tell you to stay away from slippery slopes and slippery places, slippery people, because you never know when that person, place, or thing is going to interrupt your forward progress and you're going to fall back or as we would call it, as to relapse. The challenge with the codependent, and if you're a codependent out there and you want to know what codependency really is, then you need to go to Al-Anon. Al-Anon is a great tool. It's the sister, matter of fact, Lois Wilson, who was the wife of Bill Wilson, the co-founder of AA, is the first Al-Anon member. She began Al-Anon back in the 40s. Because she realized that as Bill was getting well, she needed to get well also. And I tell people all the time, if I meet a significant other at a 12-step meeting, I challenge them, are you going to Al-Anon? Are you seeking help yourself? Because if I know what this person has put you through, and if you've lived through that and you think your life is okay, you're just as sick as they are. Because once again, people need to be going well at the same time. The challenge and why the codependent needs to get well, I think, is as the addict, alcoholic is getting well, as they're getting sober, they don't have the reliance, they don't have the messes to clean up that the codependent was basing their whole life around it. And so as they're freeing up their time, the codependent doesn't feel the need that they once did. And so they will need that person to drink, to use. As crazy as that may sound, they'll need the person to relapse in order to fulfill what they feel their mission in life is.
Do you think they always understand what they're doing? Or is it just something inside? Like when you start off in the codependency, a lot of it starts off because we love our family members and we want to help them. And then we get into it, just like the addiction started. It didn't start to become an addict.
You know, that's a great question, and because of that, the 12 steps of Al-Anon and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or OA, GA, EA, whatever A it is out there, they're the same. They have to take their inventory just as in step 4 as the alcoholic drug addict has to take it in their road to recovery. They have to find out, where does this come from? Where does my need to make the room balanced? There's a term called homeostasis, and it's a psychological term that means making balance out of things that aren't in balance, almost like a wheel that goes around and around and around. You need different people, a different weight, leaning differently on it, so it doesn't tilt off sideways and spin off. And that's what the codependent spends all of their time doing. They spend all of their time trying to make balance out of something that is very imbalanced, because nothing will imbalance a family dynamic as addiction will.
That's incredible, and I agree. I've seen it, what we do here. We see that time and time again. And a lot of the obstacles that we see in the people that we're trying to help in the recovery through programs that we're involved in, we dig in and find the codependent, that their relationship is, that's holding them back.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, that codependent might not understand totally that they are holding them back. I think doing what you're saying, getting involved with Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, any of those, so that they can basically get the training from people who have been there, done that, to see what they need to do, so they understand that the helping that they're trying to do is really helping and not hindering.
That's a great point, because it's not out of lack of caring that a codependent wants the alcoholic or the drug addict to relapse, so they have that person, but they need to feel that they're contributing. And so one of the things that I have found in any relationship, and this has just worked for me for 36 plus years, is, and you for, I think, longer you've been married, is to always try to lend to the person's power, always trying to make that person more powerful, because we know as people who are well, the more powerful someone is, the more they can lend to the situation. Instead of leaving them powerless, that's when you start trying to fix this and fix that. You try to fix things that aren't broken. And the person of recovery is not broken as much as they used to be, but yet for the codependent to find their value, to understand their mission as they would understand their mission from a dependency standpoint, because they're just as dependent on the alcoholic as being sick as the alcoholic who is sick.
You got it. You got it. And it's when you see it happening, it hurts.
Yeah.
Because, both people, like you said, it's not that the codependent wanted to cause harm. Okay, that was not their intent. And when you see that happening and telling somebody, listen, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your brother, your sister, even your mother and father aren't doing what they need to do to help you. We're not criticizing them for their desire, but they're not helping.
Yeah.
And that's hard for the addict to understand, as it is difficult for many of the codependents people to understand that they're not being helpful in those circumstances.
And I think proximity breeds so much of that. I think the closer a person is, the more they want to see you get well, and the more they'll try. In example, my father, who I was sober 71 days back in February of 1986, and then I relapsed for 5 days. My dad dropped me off at a motel in Las Vegas, and this is what my dad said to me. He said, "Your mother and I aren't going to watch you die." Tremendous. I mean, it just shook my dad to the core. He was thinking he was going to see his son for the last time alive. And as a parent, I shudder at that notion of never seeing my children alive again. It's not natural that your children would die before you. And yet my dad, he had reached his end of codependency, and he said, I can't do this anymore. If you're going to die, go die. But your mother and I have a life to live. And he understood.
So what do you think your life of recovery would have been like had your father not come to that discovery?
I'd be dead. I would be dead, because no one would have come to rescue me one more time. I would have, everything that people thought would have been, my dad cared enough to say, look, I'm going to give you a week's rent. I'm going to take you to a motel. I'll give you enough money for food. I'll pay the week rent. After that, you're on your own. And it was in that window, Mike, that I realized that I didn't want to die. And the only place that ever knew everything about me and wanted me back was Alcoholics Anonymous, was the rooms of recovery, as you've seen in drug court. The only place that will say, we love you in spite of you. Just get well. And when my dad did that, it was the greatest act of love my dad ever exhibited in my life. And my dad was alcoholic. When I was growing up, my dad never came to my games. I never remember my dad being supportive, but in that moment, my dad, 9 months later, he would say to me, Mike, he would say, your mother and I used to worry about you, but we don't worry about you anymore. And it was, to this day, it's one of the greatest memories I could ever have, because my dad and I, we came full circle.
Yeah. The story that I have to tell about me being the codependent and what I went through, my best friend growing up from the age of 3 on up through our 18, 19 years old, he became an alcoholic. I didn't know it because I hadn't seen him in 20, maybe 25, 30 years. And ended up finding him as the internet grew. You could go out and search for people that you didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay. or you knew, but you couldn't find. And I found him living actually only 6 or 7 miles from where I was living at the time. Neither of us grew up where we were, so it was kind of an unusual state. And here's a young man growing up that seemed to have everything. Okay, his parents were teachers. He lived in a nice neighborhood. He was good looking. He was an athlete. He was lettered at school. He drove a Corvette. Okay, but something happened in his early life, a trauma that we didn't discover until later. That happened, and it caused him. He'd gone to college, went on, got his master's degree. He was a teacher. He was a school guidance counselor at a very good school, but it didn't stop the development of the alcoholism. And when I found him, a friend of mine found him right before me and said, "You're not going to recognize Billy." And he wouldn't tell me anymore. And we met in a parking lot of a restaurant. And when he got out of his car, I said, I swear I was looking at his father. Okay. And found out what he was going through. And I knew very little about addiction at the time. So I decided I want to try to help him. Now, his friends that I got to meet from his school life and stuff, other teachers and stuff, said, "You're not going to get anywhere. We've all tried. He has not made his decision. He wants to do this. So I can't go with that." So I ended up for a whole summer going to AA meetings. I was even permitted to go to the private AA meetings because they knew if it weren't for me getting him there, he wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem to do anything. I was traveling for business, so I'd go to, like I said, I'd go to one of the local restaurants and put some money there and said, "This is for him for food. No change. Can't give him any money back. Got to be for food only," just so we would do that. And he had retired because his friends did give him good advice. Retire before you get fired. And he took his retirement check in one check.
Wow.
And about a year and a half, it was gone. Okay, 20 plus years of retirement money, drugs and alcohol, not drugs, alcohol and girls.
Yeah.
And he'd get himself in trouble and he'd come looking for money from me. And I said, "Well, I probably should." So every once in a while, I'd loan him some. But he'd have to give me some security, whatever. It wasn't worth it. But that didn't work either. That was just me wanting to think I was helping him. But it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't. And I finally said, "Okay, I'm at the point where I got to stop." And then my wife and I moved down here. Shortly after, I got a call from his sister and said that they found him on his living room floor, an alcohol overdose.
Yeah.
So that was my experience of being a codependent. And I know it didn't work. It didn't help him. I'm not sure what I should have done, but I know what I shouldn't have done now.
Yeah. I had, fortunately, it seemed to be unfortunate at the time, but my first wife let me go. She just said, "I'm done. I can't do this anymore. If you want to be there more than you want to be here, then I'm going to let you be there." And she changed the locks, everything. I had a brother who said to me, "We've done everything we can for you. If we could do more, we would. If we thought doing more would make a difference, we would do more. But we're done." And certain people along the way, employers, it took a lot of them. But finally, I'd got to the end of my living, and I realized once again, I didn't want to die. I just didn't know how to live. And Mike, the more I'm in recovery, and I learned an early lesson about 2 years on how codependent I am. So I don't speak of codependency as a person who doesn't experience it. I experience codependency as a recovered member of Alcoholics Anonymous, as a recovered member in the sober community. And I have found that we substitute alcohol and drugs with relationships, with a great job. I tell my kids that rich people jump out of buildings all day long. Stephen Covey says we climb the ladder of life and we realize we're leaning against the wrong wall. That's codependency. That's thinking that something, someplace, some job, some opportunity is going to give you a degree of enlightenment, and you get up to the top and you've worked so hard to get there, and you realize you're more empty than you would be had you stayed on the ground. And we get to that point, that jumping off place. We can't imagine life with alcohol. We can't imagine life with alcohol, with or without it, and we would wish for the end to come. And there's nothing more disappointing than a person who has overcome alcohol and drug addiction to find out that their life is still without meaning.
Yeah, and I think you bring up another topic that we talked about off air before you came in, and one of the things we want to talk about today. And you brought up the fact that codependency can be on both sides.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are some of the traps, okay, that get some of the people in addiction into relapse if one is already seeking recovery? What are some of these traps that are out there? And I'm thinking that maybe some of that still relates into the codependency area that we've been discussing. Am I right?
It does. Once again, the codependent needs something to be wrong to lend them their value, their mission in life. So instead of focusing on themselves from an inward perspective, they focus on what's outside. What can I fix? What can I do? Where can I be of value? Because being of value out there gives me value in here. And recovery, regardless of what it's over or what it's from, is an inside-out opportunity. That's why every 12-step program, every monotheistic religion of the world is a belief in a power greater than yourself, be it God, be it Vishnu, be it it really doesn't matter. I, as a Christian, have a very defined belief, but believe in something. Believe in something because, the Bible says that God is a spirit. Those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So we're worshiping something we can't see, which is an inside opportunity. Instead of needing. Now, interestingly enough, and you bring up something really good. Now, I'll chase a few rabbits just to get there.
That's all right.
A friend of mine, early on, I had one more failed relationship. I was about 2 years sober, and I had another failed relationship, and I went to complain to this one man named Bill. He had about 4 or 5 years more sober than me, and he said, "You don't have relationship, you take hostages."
Whoa.
And I wanted to blame them. And he said, "You take hostages. You don't enter a relationship. There's nothing relatable about you. You want things your way to make the inside of you feel good based on someone's outside." And I had to take a really good look at me. What is still broken about me? I was like a person who would drive down the street on 3 wheels, not 4. And tell you that 3 wheels is just as good as 4. I wasn't willing to look at certain areas of my life because, in actuality, I didn't like what I would see. So there's certain things I wouldn't look at, like a buffet. We can't treat recovered life like a buffet. God doesn't look at me. He looks at me as a complete person. He doesn't look at me in fragments and segments. He looks at the totality of who I am and how I act and how I present myself in life. And that's eventually over time. I don't expect a newcomer, whether it's a codependent or dependent person, I don't expect them to understand that, but I expect them to be going in that direction. That over time, as things start making more sense and you start entering that world of recovery, that you're uncomfortable with things of the past and more comfortable with things of the future. So admitting that you have a problem, believing that your behavior is insane, therefore you need to be restored to a form of sanity, turning your will and your life over to the care of God, be willing to take an inventory. And then the great thing about Al-Anon and other 12-step programs is there's always someone to share that with. And then we turn our direction back toward God, ask him to remove the defects of character, humbly ask him to remove the shortcomings, and then we go and apologize to the people that we have harmed. And then we live the recovered life moving forward. And it's the same way. It's the same with everyone, whether they're in Al-Anon or AA or NA or OA or GA, no matter where, Epic, treatment centers, it doesn't matter. The journey is the same for every single one of us. We attach different labels or different signs to it, but it's the same exact journey.
I think that's what you're saying is very important too, because people have to realize, even people that are not addicted to drugs or alcohol or any of those other things. We all have addictions of some
Yeah.
kind.
Yeah.
And if we don't control that part and realize what it is, eventually it can overcome us.
Yes.
So we got a couple of things to finish up our conversation today with that I think will probably be helpful to all, because there are things that we all have to look out for when it comes to our own wellness. That's one. And combined with that, the other thing that we can discuss in the two aspects of it is how can we together ensure that there's balance in the light of imbalance with what has occurred in our community, in our individuals, and people that are involved with recovery.
You know, that's a sensational question, and I wish I had a concise answer. How many chances do you give a person before you say, I'm done? You know, how many? I mean, I don't know what that answer is. I know what God's answer is.
Yeah.
God's answer is there's nothing that you can do to keep me from you, you know. But we're human. We're frail. I think that at some point the codependent needs to create boundaries and just say, this is going to hurt me. It's going to hurt the kids. It's going to hurt our home. It's going to hurt a number of different things, but I'm done. You know, as long as we give a person a reason to stay sick, they'll stay sick. Because selfishness and self-centeredness, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says this is the root of all of our problems. And the alcoholic, the drug addict, is the epitome of selfishness and self-centeredness. We will do everything contrary to a right way of living and then justify it and defend it all the way through. The person who's addicted needs to understand it's not about if I had a better job, if I had a better wife, if I had a better living circumstance, I would be well. No, you're not well because you haven't decided that you need to get well based on who you are and what you've done. You still want to blame other people. So I think taking personal responsibility, but certainly for the codependent to establish a set of boundaries with notification. If you do this again, we're done, and then be done. Let your yes be yes, and let your no be no.
I think you've hit it right on the spot once again, and I'm glad that you were able to be here today and talk about this.
Thank you.
I'm actually going to hope that sometime in the near future, I'll talk to the drug court team to have you maybe come in and talk to our participants, because the codependency world is so significant, and if they don't understand that it's not just who we might identify as their codependent, but also the other side of their codependency. They see the help that's coming from this person who wants to be the codependent or just doesn't realize they're being the codependent, and you don't want to give up that help.
Yeah.
And neither of those helps you to get to the real world of recovery, to the point where you say, like you did, I'm done with it. Okay? Everything I'm going to do now is to keep me going forward, not backwards. And I think that's an area that needs to be talked about more. And I bring that to the attention because I know we've been having, in our current program, we have several participants that are having to deal with this codependency, and they're not doing well at it.
Yeah.
And I think your conversation, because you've done it, you've been there, you went through that. Your parents were codependent for you, okay? And when they woke up and said, enough's enough, is what helped you get to the next step. And as you said, had your dad not that day, not driven you to that motel, checked in and said, we're done. Here's this, here's your food money, but that's it.
Yeah.
You said you'd be dead.
Yeah.
So I think that's an incredible story that has so much truth and value in it that if you don't mind, and we'll set up a time going forward, and we'll talk to the team about have you come in on a day and talk to the drug court participants about the value of understanding and dealing with codependency.
It'd be my pleasure.
Well, that's good. Well, we are, believe it or not, getting to the end of today. And once again, I'm so happy to have you back on Robert/5. We'll look forward to 6. And we're going to go forward. So everybody out there, this is Mike Feldbauer coming to you from the Flag the Voice podcast studio here in Palm Coast. Please have a look, listen, share it with your friends. The topics that we talk about here, we know affect most everybody out there, whether they want to admit it or not. I've rarely met somebody that didn't have friend or family that's gone through what we've been talking about. And the more information we have, the more knowledge we have, the more part of the solution we can be as a community instead of being part of the problem. We talk about it all the time. Stigmatism is one of the things that holds people into addiction. And that's because we treat everybody that's in addiction like they're nothing but bums. They're not going to be able to get out of it. Well, everybody, what you're seeing right now on the screen, Robert, 39 years?
39 years, 5 months, and 7 days. But who's counting?
Yeah. So everybody, again, this is Mike Valbar. We're going to be signing off today. We hope you have come on back and see us on the road to recovery from the Flagler Drug Court Foundation. Have a great day.